I will take you with me. You might learn something.
About soccer?
Nah, mate. Not about soccer. And for fuck's sake, stop saying soccer! No rules!
Sadly, this jewel of a song from Finland did not win the Eurovision Songcontest, which took place in Malmö in Sweden this past Saturday. The artist goes by the name of the Windows 95 Man. And at the tournament, he hatched out of a massive egg at the beginning of the song, and then he finished it off by pyrotechnics coming out of his jeans shorts, if you know what I mean. And if you haven't seen this highlight of European culture yet, then check out the show notes, please. The video is there. There were other highlights and lowlights as well, and I'm grateful for how the Austrian and German audiences voted. You can vote, by the way, if you live outside the European Union as well. My daughters and I voted from the US, for example. Greetings to Phil Harrison, our visiting assistant professor of football from 2 episodes ago, by the way. Back then he talked about communist Albania, but he's a big Eurovision fan himself as well. So who, if not Finland, won? Switzerland. And quite fitting, because today, for the first time, we travel to this culturally and linguistically diverse country in the middle of Europe. And we move right past the Swiss cliches to the east of the country to a former textile metropolis. Speaking of getting past cliches, by the way, this is how the winning Eurovision song from Switzerland sounded, very briefly. The artist, by the way, is Nemo. Ricola is a Swiss cough drop that you might know, and you can buy it around the world. For years, their advertising slogan has been, "Who invented it?" With this little Swiss guy dressed in suit and tie who asks that question to people around the world who claim that they invented the best cough remedy. Well, if I would ask you who invented club football in continental Europe, would you guess that the answer is the same as to the Ricola question? The Swiss did. Well, technically English students living in Switzerland, but never mind. The year was 1879, and the place was right near St. Gallen, St. Gallen, and the continent's oldest soccer club was founded. Not some club who is big and famous today, and not in some big and famous city, but in St. Gallen. In case you're thinking, by the way, well, he did an episode on 1860 Munich and 1860s before 1879. Don't overthink it. Munich were a club then, but didn't play soccer yet in 1860. FCSG, as the FC St. Gallen is known, have won 2 championships in their long history, in 1904 and 2000. And that's it. And then there's 1 cup win, too. But they also have what may well be the fanciest, best designed, and most intellectually stimulating fan-run magazine. It's called Mustard, and that name has a long history, too. And today, one of its masterminds joins us. Ruben Schöneberger is his name, and in his regular job, he's a data journalist for one of Switzerland's largest media outlets. St. Gallen is a bit off the beaten path, even for those abroad who know a little bit about Swiss soccer, and the fact that this, of all places, is continental Europe's oldest club is odd at first sight, but that is also what makes this story so endearing. What isn't endearing is that I'm afraid the Atalanta Bergamo episode is gone for good, and that makes me a little sad because it would have been a wonderful story too. Let's just say people's standards for what is reliable communication differs, and this is really the first negative experience of this kind that I've had since I'm doing this podcast. The many positive ones are the various forms of feedback from you. Please subscribe now, if you haven't already, on the platform of your choice, and spread the word through word of mouth, it's preferred, or star ratings, or social media. I don't advertise what I do here professionally, and I really, really appreciate hearing from you and you sharing the joy of exploring the rich cultural and political niches of the beautiful game with your friends. So on to Switzerland we go. Welcome, Ruben, the visiting professor of football today, and greetings to Switzerland. First guest from, well, a neighboring country for a long time in my life.
Thanks for having me.
As usual, I think before we get into club, city, culture, and maybe some politics surrounding what is Continental Europe's oldest club, a little bit on you. What's your connection to football? It's your football biography. And if you don't write or talk about it, what do you do?
I guess it's quite a common path into football. I started playing football when I was about, I'd say, 5 years old, with my local village club, so to speak. Played football till I was about 18 years old in that same club. And the interest in football grew over time. And when I was about 9 years old, I saw my first game of real life football in a top Swiss flight, which was a game of FC St. Gallen, and that sort of got me hooked. And I still am hooked.
Right. That's why you're on. How did the game end? Do you remember?
I do. It ended 3-0 for FC St. Gallen, and it was quite a typical game for FC St. Gallen. Obviously, I didn't get it until very, very much later, many years later. The club had to win the game to stay in the first league, and they had to sell stickers to get some money because they had to. I can't remember the exact amount of money, but they had to get some 100,000 of Swiss francs to be able to afford to stay in the league. And that's something that happened quite regularly since.
When was that?
That was the last game of the season, 94-95.
Man. Financial troubles. This is around the same time I attended my first game at Sturm Graz, also threatened by relegation, also in financial trouble in the mid-90s. I think we'll discover more parallels along the way. Good. You still attend? And not just that, you also write what is a remarkable, I don't know how you should call it, unofficial club magazine, fan-run magazine. The magazine is called Senf, in English, mustard, which I assume refers to exactly what you're not supposed to eat when you're in St. Gallen, right?
Yes, that's one part of the explanation why we called it Senf. It is sort of a complete no-go to eat mustard with your sausage in St. Gallen. It is said to be the best sausage you can get, and it is good enough to be eaten without mustard. It doesn't need any mustard. And all the other sausages from other parts
or ketchup,
of
let alone ketchup.
Let alone ketchup, exactly. And all the other sausages from different parts of Switzerland, they are to be eaten with mustard or ketchup or whatever, because they can't be eaten without it if you're from St. Gallen. Yeah. But that's only one part of the explanation why we chose the name Senf. It is also a German saying to give one's mustard to a topic.
To add one's mustard to a conversation, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So that's sort of a wordplay we found interesting. And even more, it is an abbreviation every time for a different sentence or different 4 words that have a connection to the issue's main topic.
It's a magazine of remarkable quality.
Thank you.
A different level of fanzine, I think. We are going to link the website in the show notes, and people can take a look, even if you don't speak German. It's worth alone to take a look at the layout and the graphics in there. Do you have a professional graphic artist on the team, or how does that come about?
Yes, we do, but he's not employed by us. He's part of the team. He founded the magazine with some 14, 15 people. But he is a full-time graphic designer, so he does that as a job as well. But he's part of the team, and he's doing it. How do you call it? As a voluntary work as well.
The magazine, honestly, is what drew my interest in the first place. I have heard before, I have known before, Continental European's first club. And to be perfectly honest with you, I assumed for a while that was a contested title. St. Gallen assumes this. There probably is a conversation and a bit of a turf war going on between St. Gallen and other clubs. It's not one of those inside jokes, though. We are talking about Continental Europe's first football club. So, yeah, maybe take us to the city where it all happens, end of the 19th century. What is St. Gallen, and why is St. Gallen, which is a city of today, correct me if I'm wrong, not even 100,000 inhabitants, the birthplace of Continental Europe's first club? How come?
You're right. It's not even 100,000 people today. It is roughly 80,000 people today, which is top 8 in Switzerland, if I'm correct. Top 10 for sure, but I think it's top 8. But it has a very rich textile history, so to speak. It was very big in embroidery. It still is. Partly not as big, obviously, as it was, but it still has some very important companies dealing in embroidery. But it used to be a very, very important city. There is sort of a myth that there used to be a direct train from St. Gallen to Paris because of its importance in the textile industry. That turned out to be not true. It wasn't really a direct train, but it sort of shows how important the city was. That it was believed a long time that it's very possible that there was a direct train. So that's what St. Gallen was famous for back then. And the club was founded by English scholars. So many clubs in continental Europe were studying in a city next to St. Gallen, and they were playing football. And at one point, that led them to found a club.
Which city is that?
That is Rorschach. It is right next to St. Gallen. It's I don't know how many inhabitants, but it's a lot smaller than St. Gallen.
Right. If you took psychology classes in high school, the Rorschach test might come to mind, named after that city. St. Gallen is located in eastern Switzerland, close to the Rhine, reasonably close to the Rhine River, the Rhine Valley. Also on its Austrian side, had a vibrant textile industry and still has some of the remnants of it. It is, however, a little bit off the beaten path in Switzerland. So it's not in the more central corridor. Is St. Gallen today, just that 8th largest city, is it a regional metropolis now? Has it economy changed a lot? What would we find if we were to travel there today and watch a match?
It is a regional metropolis would maybe be the right term to call it. There is a saying in Switzerland that Switzerland stops at Winterthur, which is a city to the west of St. Gallen, the 4th or 5th biggest, next to Zurich, and that nobody really goes further to the east. But St. Gallen has become quite big. It has a very important university, which is mainly known for its business and economic studies. And it's sort of starting to build an IT cluster, which maybe could prove once to be an important factor in the city's growth. But it is sort of a off the beaten path, sort of a bit far away for many Swiss people.
Yeah, almost Austria.
Almost Austria.
Almost Austria. All right, these English scholars, students, right? Students.
Yeah.
Found the club. Does it stay homogeneously English for very long, or is it pretty? So we should probably say, what year are we in now?
We're in the year 1879.
1879. Not too far after the American Civil War for those American listeners. Yeah.
In the spring of 1879. It doesn't really stay homogeneous for very long, but it's sort of I guess as many founding periods are, it's sort of hectic. It's sort of, there's much going on. They merge with several clubs in the first 20, 30 years. They even change their colors quite a few times. So it's there's a lot going on, and there are a few years where there's no football played, and they only survive because they have sort of a club. Their club finances are very, very good compared to other clubs, so they can afford to merge with those clubs and sort of get or keep the club alive. But the first 30 years, roughly 20 years, are very, very hectic, and there's very much going on.
Because new clubs are springing up, because the league system isn't organized yet. We're dealing with the tumultuous founding period here. The colors of green and white stick, and the name of FC St. Gallen stick as well. Who are the other early rivals that come along here? FC St. Gallen is the first club to be founded. It's not the first champion in Switzerland. What are other important teams that people might still know their names today?
Exactly, probably the most important rival in the early stages and for much of its history afterwards is Grasshopper Zurich, which is the second club, so to speak, that was founded, and the first St. Gallen could play against in a competitive manner, which is what they did in. If I'm correct, in 1892, let me look that up. I guess it's 1892. Okay. And it is their first match was played in St. Gallen, and the opponents came from Zurich by train. And St. Gallen was meeting them at the station. It was pouring rain, and the Grasshoppers sort of had an I don't know how to call it, sort of an arrogant vibe to them. So it is written, at least.
Yeah, that's still the reputation today, a little bit.
Exactly, that is exactly the reputation that is still today, and so it's a very fitting image, that first game, I'd say.
The first championship comes along once the Swiss league system is established. I think St. Gallen is the fifth Swiss champion. Is that right?
That could be the case. I actually don't know, but yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah. By the early 1900s, the club has its own stadium, which will stay around for a long, long time. The Espenmoos, so the Espe is it's the asp tree. And the Moos is a bit of a slightly swampy area. The stadium now is fairly central in the city. It still exists. There's still a pitch there. From what I understand, it's no longer the stadium of the FC. How important is that stadium in the club's history? The club plays there for over 100 years, and place makes for character, makes for culture. What are your memories of the stadium? That's where you started going as well.
Exactly. It's not over 100 years. It's quite close to 100 years. It's 98 years. But it is very, very important for the club and its history. It's the place where most of the fans who are still watching the games today saw their first game. So it's sort of where it all began. And it was a very lovely ground in a residential area with a curved roof over the main stand, and sort of a patchworky character in the rest of the ground. Not one of these stadiums that all look the same as today. Most of them do. It had character, so it was we all really enjoyed to go there. And it's the place where where we celebrated our last championship, which is now 24 years ago. So it's still a very important place for us. Sometimes our women's team and the youth team play still in the Eskimos, which is sort of a nice way to still be able to see football there.
Yeah. Women's team as well, right?
Yeah.
You already mentioned the last, so far, championship. That is in 2000. That is, again, almost 100 years between the two championships. What gives? I mean, for being the earliest club founded on the continent, there are remarkably little titles throughout the 20th century. Why is that? Does that have to do with the economic transition of the area? Why?
It's hard to say, but I guess the economic downturn might have played a role. The sort of peripheral location we just spoke about, quite close to Austria, not being really central in Switzerland, might have played a role as well. But I think it's also a sort of a sufficiency feeling, sort of a there is a saying in Swiss German, second place is good work as well. So you tend to be maybe not happy, but content with a sort of a success. Mm-hmm. And there is even a quote from one of the first presidents in the early 20th century. He was called Emil Gretler, who said after a year of no success, maybe it's better next year. So it has been like this for almost all our history. And we sort of pride ourselves in it, sort of I even wrote an article once with the title, "We only feel well if we are not well." So we sort of need the feeling of not being successful. In times when we are successful, quite a few fans usually say that is weird. That is not how I remember my club playing.
That is not my FC St. Gallen if it's winning titles.
Exactly.
And a bit of pride and modesty, which is not a bad touch at all. 2000, you're old enough to be in the stadium at the time. What are your memories of that last big title win?
I'm getting goosebumps already. It's still quite a vivid and quite a good memory, obviously. We were really, really and astonishingly good the whole season. It came in the middle of a few years where we usually had quite a good start to the season. So after the first 5 or 6 games, the whole of football Switzerland, so to speak, would say, yeah, St. Gallen starting good, getting worse. But in that particular season, we just were on a roll. We just kept winning on and on. We didn't even lose at home once, if I remember correctly. And it was just like, never seen before.
We're on the roll. Yeah,
very much so.
Who were the main rivals at the time?
Well, still Grasshoppers were and will be probably for the rest of time one of the main rivals. But FC Basel was sort of coming up in that season as well.
Yeah, that's right before the time when FC Basel starts to dominate for quite a while.
Exactly. Yeah. But they were the last ones who could have been champions as well. The last ones who still competed with us. Those two. But if I remember correctly, Lausanne-Sport from the French-speaking part of Switzerland was quite good as well in that season.
Mm-hmm. It's 2000. We are roughly the same age, and I think we came of age kind of with the rise of organized and ultra-inspired fan culture in the German-speaking areas as well. Are there the first organized groups that are popping up in St. Gallen around that time in the Aspenmo Stadium?
Yeah, there were, I guess it started in the mid-90s, late 90s, but there have been some organized fan groups around at the time of this championship. But it really took off in the following decade, I'd say. So roughly in the 2004 5.
Yeah, and also inspired by Italian fan culture and by the ultra.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah,
very much so.
Yeah, that's right. The time period when I started to be involved as well and travel away. I assume similar for you.
It was, yeah. Just sort of my. I remember that sounds quite old, but I remember the time before. But it really started at the same time. I was starting to go to almost every game, and it was the overtaking form of support in that time, as it was in many countries.
Did St. Gallen have a more British-inspired fan culture before? Was there a notable hooligan culture as well in the 80s, 90s?
It was sort of a British fan culture. There was some hooligan groups, but I'm too young to remember firsthand. But there are some articles on that, and there would have been a few groups, but I can't really tell you much about it. There's standings in terms of other groups in Switzerland.
Right. Now that title, and here's another parallel to my club, Sturm Graz, doesn't necessarily serve the club well. For one, you lose your top scorer, Charles Amoa, to Sturm Graz, where he doesn't ever do as well as he did for you. Kind of sad story for me until today. And then financial and sporting troubles soon follow. Why is that the fallout of this title?
I guess it's on the one hand, it's quite logical. You're playing the best season you could have imagined, with obviously a few players who are very good, who are probably too good for the FCSG Gallen as it has been before, and so you get the attraction of many clubs, and they are obviously in a position to just purchase whatever they want because they have the money to spend, which FCSG Gallen didn't have at that time. At that time, they were still playing in Eskimos, which, as beautiful as it was, you didn't get much chance to really make money in that stadium because it was too small. And in Switzerland, the money you get from the entrance, from the ticket prices is quite important. So you basically had to sell your best players, and you still wanted to sort of go on. You still wanted to really to really compete in European football. You wanted to maybe become champion a second time in the following year. So you had quite high expenses, but you couldn't match them basically with your income stream.
Was there already talk about a new stadium at the time?
It sort of started back then. Not very very detailed, but it was obvious that at some point in time there has to be a new stadium, and I think we were all still hoping that it could have been at the same spot, but it soon turned out to be impossible to build it on the very same spot for various reasons.
Too close to a neighborhood? Ground?
Yeah, too close to a neighborhood. Traffic was a problem. Mm-hmm. And the underground was, as you just mentioned it, Moos is a sort of a swampy underground.
Yeah.
So it would have been difficult to build anyway. Just not doable.
The new stadium is eventually open in 2008, and we'll get to that and what that stadium means for the club since then soon. Before then, though, you have a very sad goodbye to the old stadium. That season, St. Gallen not only gets relegated, the last game also ends in turmoil. Were you there?
Yeah, that is probably the worst memory I have of that stadium. or of the whole season, to be honest. We were relegated in the last game. It was a relegation game. If you ended in ninth place in the first league, you had to play relegation against a team in the second place from the second league.
Yeah, Swiss League only had 10 clubs back then. So.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so we had to play that relegation round, and it was clear that the second game in that relegation, it was a two game tie. The second game in that relegation round would be our last ever game in the stadium Espen Moos. And we didn't manage to win it, which is in itself a very sad fact. We had to say goodbye to the Super League, as it is called, the first league.
Yeah.
But it was a very I don't even still now I'm struggling to find words to describe that evening, because it was tensions were high beforehand. The police were expecting turmoil, and they chose a strategy which turned out to be not the best strategy, which sort of made it worse, and it ended in saying goodbye amongst plumes of tear gas and crying because you just got relegated, crying because of the tear gas, stones being thrown from the fans at the police firing rubber bullets back. It was all in all a very, very sad evening.
Does that shape some memories of the old stadium as well now, more than a decade on?
I wouldn't say it shapes memories. I guess we all have so many memories that there are enough other memories, better memories. Some sad as well, but not in that way. So yeah. I'd say it's still very much in our heads, and it still sort of takes a special place in the remembrance of the stadium, so to speak. But I wouldn't say it shapes the memory.
The new stadium gets opened in the fall, and so Gallen is in second league. How did it feel? Move into the shiny new place, and you're playing much more regional teams and not the big names anymore.
Well, in the end, I'm not sure, but it might have been a good thing after all, because the moving into that new stadium was in itself a very big task for the club, for the players, for the management, but for the fans mostly, because you got so attached to your old stadium, and you had to find a new home in that new stadium, which didn't have much color, which felt sort of sterile vibe to it. And because we were in the second league, and we were the absolute favorites to win it, we sort of could focus on other things, and maybe that helped us to settle in that new stadium. But it did feel weird to have this new stadium, which was sort of a promise that everything gets better as soon as we move into that new stadium. And
right.
As soon as you really do move in that new stadium, you're in the second league.
Yeah. What kind of stadium is it? I mean, it's a modern stadium. Could you tell us a little bit about where in the city it's located? And if we were to approach it today, what would the vibe be?
Well, I always say it's one of the best stadiums of the new stadiums. So I still don't really like the new stadiums. That sounds very old again, but I still don't really. Yeah. I still don't really like them, because they are. It's just a lot of concrete with no character, mostly. But they did build it quite well. So you're quite close to the ground. It's not too big. It's not too small. It's if you agree, you have to move into a new stadium to be sort of part of the game. It is quite all right, and it's starting to feel a bit more like home from year to year. Obviously, because you go there every other week.
Right.
It's still not the same, but it's quite okay.
Yeah.
The main problem is that its location is just not as nice as it used to be with Eskimos, which was in a residential area. Now we're in an industrial area next to the highway.
Close to the IKEA, right?
Exactly. So it's you can go there for shopping. You can go there if you have a business with some of the companies in the industrial area around it, but it's not a place where you would go to spend your Saturday afternoon if it wasn't for football.
Yeah. How much capacity does it have, the new place?
It's roughly 20,000 people, which is quite big for Switzerland.
Right. Many more VIP spaces as well. Is there a standing terrace behind the goal?
There is. Since half a year, maybe, there is even a standing terrace for the away fans, for the visiting fans. But there always has been one for the home fans, except obviously for international games there you had to install seats.
And the name for the curve behind the goal in St. Gallen, which right now is Espenblock, a combination of the name of the old stadium and then the block for the section in the stands. Is that when it comes about as kind of a little wave at the old stadium?
Yes, very much so. And the second part probably of the explanation is that not only was the Eskimos our old stadium, but the Espen was the nickname of the team. So the Espen is still a term used because we moved to a new stadium, but you sort of stay the Espen at the new place as well. So it's sort of an homage, if that word exists in
right.
English,
yeah.
to the old stadium. Yes.
Is that also a signifier of various fan groups unifying under that banner, or are there still individual ultra-oriented groups below
there's
that?
Still individual groups, but it's sort of a unified voice at home. Yes, I'd say so. But there's still several groups.
Some of the oldest groups still around that began in the 90s?
Yeah, they actually just had their 30th anniversary celebrations a few weeks ago.
Okay. And are now, though, basically underneath that banner, Espenblock.
Yeah, they're part of the home fan sector amongst other groups as well, yeah.
Has that part of the fan culture grown in the new stadium? I mean, capacity is thing. Success on the pitch in this case isn't there immediately, but still, does the new stadium grow the fan scene as well, especially among young people?
It did. But I guess the biggest in the whole of Switzerland, the biggest sort of a trend started with the end of the Corona period.
Okay.
The COVID period, where all the Swiss, or pretty much all of the Swiss fan scenes were experiencing quite some growth, and mainly with younger fans.
Why do you think that is? I mean, this is not just a Swiss phenomenon. I see the same thing happening in Austria too. Do you have a theory on why that is?
I'd say it's you had to stay at home for that long that you want to you obviously can't get back to that time and live those moments, but you sort of come out with a huge desire to attend live events, and to attend live events with a group and not being on your own. I guess that would be my explanation.
Yeah, just a hunger.
Yeah.
Something in public. All right, you told us the calculation was the Eskimos isn't bringing in enough revenue. They're going to move to the new stadium. Revenue will increase and the future will be bright on the pitch, of course, but also financially. Does that happen?
As often as it always is, basically, as it often is the case, it didn't. No. We moved to the new stadium, and the people who were in charge back then decided very much last minute to add some VIP places, which they didn't usually plan for, and they couldn't use a mortgage on those, so they had to take out a normal loan.
So that's the club taking out a loan for these additional spots, not the city or the county paying for it. Yeah.
Well, actually, it's a sort of a construct with a few companies, so it's not exactly the club that took the money, but it's the club that sort of had to pay the price in the end. And the interest in these loans were just too big, so they still had financial problems, which nearly ended in bankruptcy.
St. Gallen goes back up again to the first league quickly, but then goes back down again, and then a little bit later back up again. Those are also the years of financial trouble. How is bankruptcy avoided in the end?
It was avoided in the end by a few people who offered some money, but took over because it's sort of logical. If you give someone your money, you want to have a say in what is being done with the money. So that's what happened.
Right. So what is there to take over at the time? Are we talking about a member-owned 50+1 structured club? Are we talking about an outsourced legal entity that is being taken over? What's being taken over there?
It is an outsourced legal entity. In Switzerland, you had to have such an outsourced legal entity, a so-called Aktiengesellschaft, which is a shareholder company, basically. You had to be organized. You had to organize your first team at least in such a company. You weren't allowed to run your first team in a 50+1 member-based construct anymore since 2000-ish.
All right. So even in that shareholder construct, the original club doesn't hold 50+1%, as would be the regulation in Germany.
No, it doesn't. It was a more or less publicly available share, so you could buy your share. I do have one share of that company as well, but obviously some people with more money got some shares more than I did, or all of my colleagues did. Yes. And as it is, if you have the majority of the shares, you can decide pretty much what is going to happen with that company. And that is what happened when some people brought in their money. They didn't have to convince us, basically. They had to convince those people with the most shares that the construct could be remodeled in their favor. And it ended in a second outsourced legal entity with only a few shareholders. And this second company has quite a big share of the first outsourced legal entity. And so if you only have one share of that first legal entity, you are invited to the annual shareholder event, but that's about it.
While we're on it, is this a debate in Switzerland? I mean, you now have the football regulator in England that's being proposed, and which is about some fan input, at least in the proceedings of what are essentially companies. If the 50+1 conflict ongoing in Germany, how's the situation in Switzerland about fan ownership of clubs?
Almost no topic at all. Almost nobody outside the organized fan groups, obviously, is speaking of any fan involvement in a more concrete or in a more substantial way.
The original club, FC St. Gallen, still exists, not just on paper, but I assume it runs the youth teams, maybe the women's team as well. Is that correct?
Well, as of today, there's almost nothing left in the usual association. It's mainly just the sort of bearer of the trademark, which it lends to the legal entity. Mm-hmm. But almost all the teams, even the youth teams, are part of the outsourced entity now.
Okay. And that's a different model from Austria too. Does the new stadium then pay off eventually? Does the turnaround happen?
It does. I'm not 100% sure what the role of the new stadium is, but the turnaround does happen in part of those people who did overtake back then. They did they did an okay job. The problem mainly was that the president got sick and had to sell the club quite urgently, and that was turmoil again for a short period of time, I'd say.
Yeah, in the middle of the 2010s.
Yeah, exactly. And afterwards, when the current president took over, you could say it's quite okay since he took over, and that's the part of the history where I'd say the new stadium has played its role, because he managed to get a large numbers of fans into the stadium, which we obviously couldn't have had if we were still playing in the Espenhus, because it was quite a lot smaller. So it has played a role in the last, I'd say, 5-6 years.
Okay. Only 5 years after that afternoon in the Espenmoos with the riots and the relegation, you travel to Moscow together with hundreds of other St. Gallen fans and play in the Europa League. That's how I think we can cap that tumultuous early years in the new stadium. Well, dramatic game. I think it was 4-2 or 4-3? 4-2, right?
4-2, yeah.
Against Spartak Moscow. And you were there?
Yeah.
What are the memories of that day?
Yeah, goosebumps again. Probably one of my best memories I have with that club. We were, it was the Europa League playoff round, and we played 1-1 in the first leg at home. And we didn't really think we could make it, to be honest. We didn't really think that we could win in Moscow against Spartak. So we sort of traveled to Moscow to be there at our only European game that season, and the only European game for quite a while. And then we were in Moscow with roughly 400, 500 people, having a good time, being nervous, obviously, all day long. And then when we were in that stadium, we conceded a goal quite early on. And everyone around me was saying, yeah, obviously, couldn't have gone any other way.
Yeah, that's it.
But then we somehow managed to turn it around.
And then you were in the group stage.
And then we were in the group stage.
Where did the travels go at that? This is rare. We've had clubs featured on here as well. I have international experiences much more frequently, but I think I can relate to know what that means for a club the size of FC St. Gallen to be international again. Who were your opponents there?
That is super rare, yes. We played Swansea, which were good back then, or at least better than they are nowadays. Yeah. We played Valencia, and we played Krasnodar, Russia again.
Russia again? Did you go to Krasnodar?
I did. We planned to just fly in, watch some football, fly back out. But it was 2013 was not long before the Olympics in Sochi, and the airport in Krasnodar was the second airport if the one in Sochi would be overused, and so they had to do some urgent repair works, which resulted in us having to stay a night in Krasnodar with no hotel booked beforehand. We somehow managed to get a hotel room for everybody who was on that flight into Krasnodar, but it's special memories, nice memories, but very special memories.
Stranded in Krasnodar.
Exactly.
It's always interesting about continental teams playing English teams in the Europa League, Conference League, Champions League. The contrast between fan culture. How did you experience that in Swansea?
I'm really fond of English football, and I go there quite a lot, so I did know what to expect. And I really looked forward to being on that side, so to speak, on being that fan who could drink in the pubs before the game and then march to the stadium. But obviously, I very much preferred that, let's say, ultra way of support to the British support, which tends to be quiet during quite some part of the game.
Yeah, and much more dependent on how the game goes.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Good. You sang Swansea out of their stadium?
We did. They had a fan forum on the internet, the Swansea forum. I can't remember its name. And they later on in the Europa League, they played against Napoli, and even after that game, they were celebrating our performance in the stadium because they were astonished that I think they said a load of Swiss could outsing the famous Napoli ultras.
You made more of an impression than Napoli there.
But I guess to be fair, Napoli can play in the European competitions quite often compared to us. So maybe we wouldn't have been. I can't remember. I think we were over 1,000 people in Swansea. That probably wouldn't happen if we would qualify every year.
Yeah. And it hasn't really happened in the same way. Again, since then, not much international presence for St. Gallen. I think you had one more qualifying round after that, right?
I read two, but the second one was during COVID, when you only had one leg. The tie was only one leg and not two legs, and no fans allowed. So we lost against IK Athens at home, but that doesn't really count. The one that does count was we played Salzburg, a Norwegian team, which was quite a nice place to travel to, but we lost.
Lost, yes. Since then, however, the situation on the pitch has stabilized a little bit. No more relegations, at least. You're currently fourth in the table. Might look good for Europe again.
Yeah, it might look good, especially because beginning with this season, we adopted the Scottish way of how your league works, so that after 33 rounds, the table is split in half, and you only compete with your half for the last 5 games, and we managed to get in the top half. And because the eventual winner of the cup trophy is in that first half as well, you only have to be 5th out of 6 to end up in a European qualification round. So we should make it. We could still be 6th at the end of it, but it does look quite good at the moment.
You just mentioned the Swiss league system, Scottish model. This also is the Austrian model. So 12 teams. The table is split after every team has played each other one twice. Is the playoff then still a thing, or was that nixed in Switzerland? Because I know there was a proposal on the table where the championship then, on top of splitting the table, was to be decided in a playoff between the first and the second. Not happening.
Not happening. There was quite some Well, all of the Swiss fanzines basically protested very strongly about it, and even some newspapers, some clubs as well. In the end, obviously, because they had to agree on a league system. But it's now completely gone. It's not even there's not even a European playoff, which, if I'm correct, Austria still does. That you can end up in the lower half, but still manage to be in the European
it's a very weird kind of playoff. Yes, if you win the lower half, then there is still a way to make it in there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So obviously, it's not a system that has an outcome that necessarily accurately reflects the strength of the teams across the whole season. And Austria had a case 2 years ago where a team was relegated that, if you would have counted the regular way, would not have gotten relegated. So was not actually the worst team across the season, but still ended up last and got relegated. Young Boys Bern have kind of replaced FC Basel as the standard bearer up there at the top of the table. St. Gallen middling, but in the upper half. How are the prospects looking? Club seems to have stabilized. There is new leadership. A fairly well-known journalist is now the president. What makes FC St. Gallen tick now? What's the vibe around the club?
I'd say we have stabilized. It has been the case for almost every season now that we have one good half of the season and one not so good half of the season, which was the case in that 2013 season as well. When we played Moscow, we had a good first half with all those games in Moscow, Swansea, Valencia, and a very, very bad second half. And that is happening quite a lot. Actually, it happened this season as well. We were second at the break in winter, and the start in 2024 was rubbish basically. But we managed to get a grip basically in the last 3 rounds. So maybe that is the first season where the second half is not as bad as it has been in the last few seasons. And if we really manage to play 1, 2, maybe more European games, then that would be sort of a next step in that stabilization of the club.
Yeah. Speaking of stabilization, you've had a coach now, the same coach for the last 6 years. That is rather rare, given the halfway time of coaches in the upper leagues. Peter Zeidler is his name, German guy. Has some Red Bull background too. What's making him and St. Gallen click at the moment?
It is this new the new owners, the new management that came in a few years ago. Really had they have a way of doing things. They're the complete opposite of so many managements that are basically hire and fire. They tend to agree on a way they want to do things and go on with it, even if it doesn't pay off right away. And they try to stick with that. It had its first sort of little dent when they fired Alain Souto, which was the sporting director, because they wanted to basically make the next step, and they didn't feel it was going to happen with him. But it's very no how in fire. It's very steady on. It's very sort of calm and not overreacting, maybe way of doing things.
And despite that, and maybe because of that, around 15,000 average attendance, record numbers. The city, you said around 80,000 inhabitants. So we're almost at a quarter of those in the stadium, technically speaking, at home games. That is an astonishing rate. Why? What gels between the club and the city?
It is astonishing. To be fair, it's not only the city; it's quite a big part of eastern Switzerland that is closest to FC St. Gallen.
It's the Regions Club as well.
Exactly. Not only the Cities Club, but the Regions Club as well. And the sort of self-deprecating, is that the right word? Way
self-deprecating,
of analyzing it would be, there's not much more to do around here. But I don't fully agree with that stance, because the new management has gotten around to get that engagement of the region back, and they try to visit many very local, very small clubs during summer training, for example, and so get a sort of a connection with the community. And that is really, it's working. Obviously, we had quite a big average before, but it has never been as high as it is right now. And obviously, the region sort of comes together for its club.
Is there anything particularly to look out for at a stadium visit now that would distinguish a match day and the atmosphere in St. Gallen from other bigger Swiss teams?
I'd say it's sort of a get together. It really got a vibe of people meeting other people. You could say that for many clubs, I guess. But it's also the atmosphere can be quite good even if you're not winning. So it's sort of you go there, you support your club, and do it even if times are rough. And I would say that it's hard to say, because if you just know the feeling you have because you're going there every other week, so you just know what to expect. It's hard to put it in words, but I'd say it is a special atmosphere. It is a sort of connection to the team, to the club, that you only get with clubs or with teams that are not winning all the time. Where you just know you are part of it, and you want to be part of it no matter what. It's an atmosphere you wouldn't get with, let's say, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, with teams that attract a lot of spectators just because the football is very good.
And given the large size of the fan base, the regional nature of the fan base, is it fair to say that the St. Gallen fan culture isn't marked by any particular politics or any particular subculture, but is pretty broadly stratified?
Very much so. It is the regions, the sub-regions, so to speak, that come together are quite different. The people are quite different. The only common thing is FC St. Gallen. You get all variations of every other topic in the stadium.
How many of these people buy Senf, the mustard magazine? And how come such an artsy magazine makes it big in what we called a regional metropolis, a city that's only the 8th largest in Switzerland and not the one known for particular artistic creativity?
We usually publish around we publish an issue every 6 months, roughly, and there are 1,000 copies, which we almost sell. Some of our issues are sold out, some of them are not. It's hard to say why this magazine is published in St. No, it's not hard to say why it is published in St. Gallen, because it just happened that a few people came together with an interest in doing it. We had me and a few others who wanted to write, and our graphic designer wanted to design. We had a few people who wanted to take pictures. So it was just the right mixture of people. I don't know why there are not as many other publications in other parts of Switzerland. There are a few. We are not the only ones who are publishing a magazine. But for us, it's just a few people who found them and thought it would be a nice thing to do.
And publishing twice, maybe 3 times a year also means you're covering topics around the club at higher altitude. So this is not a magazine about who scored the last goal. This is working on bigger questions. For example?
Exactly. We usually have around 80, 90 pages. And only, I'd say, 10 of them are dealing with the current standings in the league, for example, or the current squad or the current best player or things like that. We usually have one main topic, which is roughly half of the magazine, and the topics range from security issues to history of the club, to football and art, to football and film was one of the latest we did. Yeah. So it's basically any topic we find interesting and we are willing to do.
Wonderful. Well, if we were to talk again in 10 years, what would it take for you to say these have been good 10 years for Senf and for St. Gallen? What do you think the future holds?
I usually say I don't expect anything positive around FC St. Gallen, because then the surprise is much nicer.
Yeah.
I'd say I would be, speaking of Senf, I would be happy if we still would do nice magazines, projects, nice stuff whatsoever. I do like that the DIY, that if nobody else does it, we do it. I do like that, and I hope that we can continue doing nice stuff. Speaking of FC St. Gallen, I would be happy with 1 or 2 European seasons. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Maybe sort of what we really want to achieve much more maybe than a championship is the Swiss Cup, to win the Swiss Cup again. We did lose twice in the last few years in the final, so that is sort of a it's still bothers. Yeah, it still bothers us that we lost both finals in a row. So that would maybe be, if we win 1 Swiss Cup in the next 10 years, I'm happy, whatever comes.
Wonderful. And that the stadium will feel even more like home.
That would be lovely as well.
Well, thanks for an inside look into a very old and very modest club. I don't hear a lot of hand waving and merch coming out of St. Gallen that makes a big deal about being the oldest. But I hear a lot of quiet tradition mindedness, some pragmatism and realism looking forward, and a lot of ties to the city and to the region. Thank you, Ruben. Did we miss anything? Anything you'd like to add?
Well, we could talk for hours, but I don't think we missed an important part. So thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you. All the best to you. All the best to the last games of the season for St. Gallen, and maybe a Sturm Graz St. Gallen pairing in some group stage in Europe would be fun sometime.
That would be fun.
Good. Be well, Ruben. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I would be remiss to mention to you, of course, that Sturm Graz has won the Austrian Cup again after last year, and again against Rapid Vienna. It was a wonderful 1st of May there last week. Sturm is also close, really anxiously close to winning the championship this year, which would be a massive upset of Red Bull Salzburg. Dan Smith, an English listener of this podcast who we've heard from on here before, was at the Cup final. He left a little voicemail with me on his way back, and I was going to play that to you as well. So cheer for us if at all possible, and your loyalties allow that. The decisive game for Sturm's championship is this coming Sunday. After that, we will hear each other again, and until then, be well.
Hi Philip, it's Dan from Dan and Archie, aka at Sturm in UK. Just wanted to drop you a little voice note. I know that looking at your social medias over the last couple of days, you had a FaceTime from your father who was at the OFB Cup final. I've just got back. I'm just returned back to England from flying back from Vienna after a few days in Klagenfurt for the Cup final. I just wanted to share with you my views really on the game and what an incredible game it was. The day started for me with at 8 o'clock in the morning on the fan buses. I was lucky enough to get a ticket and get a space on one of the buses. So we left Graz at 8, drove down to Klagenfurt, got to the stadium, set up all the choreography, and then went back outside and just had a party basically, and it was brilliant, which I don't think you'll pick up from the TV coverage. But the game itself, going in half time, 1-0 down was tough, but Ilsner's worked his magic again as he does, and Sturm have shown their fighting spirit and came out second half, and the right result, I think, in my opinion. As obviously a Sturm Graz fan, I'm going to say that I'm quite biased, but after the game I stayed for about 3 hours in the car parks. More just a party atmosphere, just incredible. Anyway, I thought I'd touch base. Take care, keep up the good work with the pod, and off die Schweiz.